Our next panel is entitled Delivering the Skills of the Future, and it's going to focus on the important role the education sector has to play in preparing students to enter these new dynamic industries, fill this skills gap that's there, build successful careers. So here to guide the discussion is the Executive Vice President and Provost of the University of Nevada at Las Vegas, Dr. Diane Chase. So please welcome Dr. Chase to the stage.
Thank you. And I guess I'm going to welcome everyone else. So next we have Miss Elisa Villanueva Beard, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Teach for America. Mrs. Linda Head, Senior Associate Vice Chancellor, Lone Star College. Mr. Doug McCarron, General President, United Brotherhood of Carpenters. And Dr. Thom Reilly, Chancellor of the Nevada System of Higher Education. So, as you've heard, this panel is going to explore both the formal and informal ways that education and training are evolving to deliver an adaptive skill set. And I have a series of questions. We'll see how many I get to ask. But my first one is for you, Doug. The Carpenters International Training Center in Las Vegas is the largest and most comprehensive training center of its kind in the world. How has this training hub helped you meet the demands and needs of your workers, along with the needs of the industry?
Very good. Well, the training center sits on 27 acres right off the 215 by the airport. We have 1,300,000 square feet there. We fly in over 20,000 carpenters for training there every year, and instructors at our 200 regional training centers throughout North America to upgrade their skills and make sure they're still on the ball. And we really use the center not only for leadership training, communication training, but also for problem solving. One of the problems we've had in the industry with big concern to us and our employers was the age of apprentices coming into the trade. And we put a program together, it's called Career Connections, where we go into the high schools and we put our carpentry curriculum into the high schools. And they go through 3 years of high school. The last year, they work for 4 hours for one of our contractors, and they go to school for 4 hours, and they have direct access into our training program. So what was happening, the average age of an apprentice in the industry was 28, and we want to lower that back down to 18, 19, or 20. So that's been very, very positive. It's been a solution. So that's just one of the problems that we really work through there with our members and our employers.
Excellent. Do I get a tour later?
Pardon me?
Do I get a tour?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Look forward to it.
Thom, the next question is for you. The Nevada System of Higher Education recently entered into a partnership with MGM, the MGM College Opportunity Program, to make higher education affordable and accessible to its more than 70,000 employees. So my question for you is, what are the challenges and opportunities for connecting an entire system of higher education to support continuous lifelong learning?
Diane, thanks for the question too. You know, the College Opportunity Program with MGM, this is the first time nationally that a Fortune 500 company has actually partnered with an entire system of higher education, from our community college system on to our research institutions. An important component of the program is that any of the employees at MGM nationwide can access any of our online certificates or degrees at any of our 7 degree granting institutions. And the focus, though, is actually on certificate or degree completion. So employees can't just take a random class, because the focus is actually on them obtaining a degree or obtaining a certificate. There's actually 2 main reasons that kind of underscore the partnership. And one is, you know, the focus, and this is dealing with a lot of non-traditional students through continuous learning. It's focused on the issue of degree completion and actually career pathways. And there's a lot of opportunities and challenges with this. Let me just mention a couple of the opportunities. Obviously, to have the largest employer in the state of Nevada send a very powerful message that as they transform their company, they are going to provide their employees with opportunities for additional skills and degrees and job opportunities. So for example, a housekeeper can enter or obtain a certificate in advanced manufacturing or HVAC, or develop a pathway to a degree in biology or chemistry, which is pretty remarkable. So the opportunity is, how do we replicate those opportunities, not only within Nevada, but nationally, particularly when we're dealing with issues of affordability. I mean, part of the component of this partnership is that individuals will need to fill out federal application for assistance, because we leave a lot of money on the table for individuals. So that alone kind of increases, this, various opportunities on it. But some of the challenges that you create on this is that as we work towards, degree completion and career opportunities, is that what we know that works around the issue of degree completion is a lot of high-touch programs. We know this. We just recently, in the system of higher education in Nevada, had a summit on how we achieve close the achievement gap. By 2025, we want to know gap, and we know the programs that work are those that have high touch. For example, that have counseling, that have advising, that have a lot of opportunities to connect with students. But the problem becomes, how do you scale those up? The other issue is that as we're dealing with this population, you have to look at, well, what are different ways that we offer higher education? We need to be more nimble. We need to be more flexible. For those that take classes, they need to be in the evening. They need to be perhaps and sometimes on the job, as we partner with labor and we partner with different industries. So the challenge becomes with higher education institutions is that how do we refocus and retool ourselves that we're actually offering various different degrees. One of the whole idea about the MGM partnership is that we actually partner with higher education and MGM, and what we're doing is that this partnership is pushing us towards offering more online degree programs. It is also focusing us on how we partner with industry to offer our classes. So it's not only the degrees or certificates that we offer, but it's also the content. I mean, what we heard earlier today, and we continue to hear from industry, is that the workforce, the needs of the workforce aren't necessarily being met by the certificate or degrees that we're producing. What we hear is that there's a need for digital literacy. There's a need for basic literacy on how to communicate and write. But also is the connection that if we are focused on the career pathways, we need to align them to the type of industries that are available to ensure that there's a pathway in that. But we also have to talk about what are we missing in our content? So what is missing a lot of time is that perhaps we're producing good managers. We're producing those that are proficient in finance and HR. But what is needed in the world today is that it's not only how you manage and become proficient, but how do you manage resources and people that don't belong to you? That is a totally different skill set. That is a skill set on collaboration, that is a skill on coordination, that a lot of time from industry perspective is missing in our content. So there's enormous opportunities in these partnerships, and we're looking forward to continue the dialogue, not only with MGM, but with a lot of our other industries in the state.
Sounds good. Elisa, you're next. For those policymakers and leaders in the audience, what areas of focus in K through 12 education in particular are putting kids on track for success in college and career?
It's great to be here with all of you today. So, we've been talking about the changing world, and it has profound impacts on our political, economic, and social context, and that's the world that our kids are growing up in. And I often think about how my 4-year-old today, when he enters the workforce, we can likely not even predict what kind of job he's going to be competing for because it likely doesn't even exist. And so I center on that fact and say it's such an imperative in K-12 education that we are evolving and changing to be able to ensure that our kids are able to thrive and lead in the changing world and the world they're going to inherit for themselves, but also for us and for future generations. The good news about this is that we should anchor in hope and optimism, which is where I anchor, and it's because we've learned so much about what is possible for kids to achieve in the last 30 years. I mean, I don't know how inspired you all were listening to Mayor Emanuel, but this is the 3rd largest district in America, and he gave you all the stats of all the innovative things that he's done. This is a place where, on average, a child who is growing up in this city between grades 3 and 8 will make 6 years of academic progress in 5 years' time. Now, that is profoundly incredible for us to really internalize. They've doubled the number of kids going to and through college, ACT scores are on the rise, et cetera. And the reason that's important is because there's so many learnings to take away from this community, but also many others. We could literally go here and name community after community where we've seen profound change and progress that kids are capable of. And I remember when I joined Teach for America in 1998 as a teacher, the conversation we were having in America was, can children in urban, rural America, kids in low-income communities, achieve as well as their most affluent peers? And the reason it was a conversation was because we didn't have the Chicago proof point. We didn't have hundreds of schools in America that were showing us, of course, that's possible. We all knew that, but now we have the schools and we say, awesome. We know our kids can do this, and now it's going to be up to the adults. Do we have the political will and courage to continue to build on the change? And still, with that progress, it's not enough. Like when you pull up and you say, what's on average going on in our country? Well, number one, where you happen to be born still largely dictates your life outcomes. And the reason for that is children growing up in low-income communities often do not have access to great schools. And education is the key, and access to opportunity, which we've all been talking about here this morning. Second, our kids are bored out of their mind. Education it's not relevant to their expectations, to what they have access to. There was a study that I read, The Opportunity Myth, that shows 50% of kids in middle school are disengaged, literally bored. Not paying attention, do not think the content is relevant, and 60% of kids in high school are disengaged. And that is because we're doing schools mostly how we've done, and we heard earlier today, when kids are graduating from high school, they're not college and career ready. 40% will have to take remedial courses, 60% of Black kids on average, and 53% of Latino kids on average. And this is a disaster for families because this costs families $1.5 billion a year, and if you're a first-generation college-going kid, you are 74% more likely to drop out of college if you take even one remedial course. And of course, remedial courses, you get no college credit. And so we have to step back and say, that is what is happening, and the 21st century global society and workforce is demanding something very different from our kids. Our kids need to learn how to be critical thinkers, how to collaborate, how to communicate, how to be creative, how to learn, because they're going to have to be deeply resilient to operate in a changing world, and they're going to have to learn different jobs throughout their career, and that is what we have to be preparing our kids for. We still work on an agrarian calendar with our schools, and so I think we have a reckoning, and we have to wake up and say, this is our moment, and in my view, we need to really step back and ask ourselves, what is the purpose of education, and what is an excellent education in a 21st century global society? We need kids to have purpose, know who they are. AI is going to shape so much of our society. They need to be able to discern between truth and not truth. They're absorbing so much knowledge and are going to have to make sense of that. And so the good news is we know our kids can do it, and it's up to us to figure out how are we going to evolve and really ensure that we reinvent education so our kids are able to lead.
Great. Linda, you developed competency-based workforce associate degree and certificate programs at Lone Star College, which serves more than 90,000 students. Could you tell us a little bit about those programs and help us understand how they shape successful career pathways?
I'd love to. Thank you. I have a greatest job in the world. I get to meet with employers every day, see where their jobs are and where their needs are, turn those into degrees and certificates, and then help create the curriculum develop and design labs so that there's hands-on learning, and then go out back to those employers and say, okay, we got it, now hire our completers and our graduates. And we still teach at Lone Star College GED preparation, English as a second language, as part of the puzzle to getting people from poverty to work, and for 99,000 students. First thing we had to do was define community college. Is community college a place where your kid goes that joined a fraternity and flunked out of University of Texas and so he had to come back home for a semester and take his history, math, government? Or is community college the place where a 30-year-old woman with 3 children and no husband goes because she doesn't want to work at the mall anymore? Or is community college the place to go where a veteran who's recently transitioned out of the military goes because he doesn't quite have the right skills that fit for a multinational organization, and does he really know what mechatronics is, and does he need a little bit more training? Or is community college a place where you go to transfer to University of Nevada or one of these other great institutions because you want to be a doctor, a lawyer, or a college professor? It's all of those. So the first thing that I try to do in my role is change a perception of what a community college is and represent the 1,100 of them across the country and the impact that we make. The second thing we do is bring in the employers. It was so neat to hear all the employers and see what they're doing at MGM and Comcast. They're trying to train and educate a workforce because they have to have it to be successful. I moved from Erie, Pennsylvania to Houston. Houston's a manufacturing town. Manufacturing town. Yes, we have oil and gas, but somebody has to make all the petrochemical plants for ExxonMobil and Chevron, and somebody has to make the oil rigs, and somebody has to make the pipelines, and someone has to go out and service and repair them. And my friends from the Pittsburgh area are making money off oil and gas is alive and well. And so is water drilling, and so are pipelines. But it's manufacturing where the jobs are, and whether you're making cars in Detroit or whether you're making pipe in Texas, it's still manufacturing. And those jobs have changed. The jobs that I grew up in, my dad ended up in one company his entire life, and it was tool and die. Those jobs have changed dramatically. These jobs have electricity, electronics, hydraulics, pneumatics, advanced PLCs, technical math. These are jobs where you have to go beyond high school. And if you're a dropout, you haven't had enough math to work in one of these companies. And these companies pay $18.50 an hour to start. So the last 2 points I want to make. One is we look at labor market data every day. We know who's hiring cybersecurity professionals, who's hiring nurses, who's hiring welders, and what kind of welding. Stick, MIG, TIG welding, special brazing, special metals. What exactly are they looking for? We take those competencies that are from resumes and from talking to our employers and develop very succinct, detailed curriculum. Just our oil and gas program for a floor hand roustabout that most of you probably think is a guy with big muscles and mud on his face who probably dropped out of high school and gets thrown on a rig. We have 360 technical competencies in that program. 360 technical competencies. When you got a syllabus in your history class, how many student outcomes were in it? 8? And then we have 40 behavioral skills that we've added to every Associate of Applied Science degree, because everyone wants to hire a veteran. Why do they want to hire a veteran? Because they can perform these 40 behavioral skills. They've learned them. And the last thing is to be nimble. We are extremely nimble. Just because we developed programming 25 years ago doesn't mean programming is the same today. We update and modify our programs every year, and we have very succinct program review. And we analyze and review our programs, both with the employers and with our graduates. And we make sure that our faculty know, if you're going to come work at our college, you have to be relevant, you have to continue to get certifications yourselves, and you have to be willing to update your curriculum and work in a lab where there is as much hands-on as there is theory.
Okay. All right. Doug, Could we follow up a little bit, and can you help us understand a little bit more about how apprenticeship programs in general, yours or in general, qualify workers for new job opportunities?
Well,
We've been talking a lot more about, the more typical academic
The
education.
construction industry is always changing, apprenticeship in the construction industry. And not only apprenticeship, we also do an awful lot of journeyman retraining because of the skills that keep changing, like the BIM, building image modeling. Now when I was working with my tools, we had a roll of paper with the plans on them. We carried with them. Now it's on an iPad or it's on a big machine. We're building a job like this and something doesn't work. We've got a change order. Well, back in the past, that would take us maybe 4 or 5 days to get to the architect, the engineer to change that. Now a foreman hits an iPad, email goes to the architect and the engineer, comes back within 2 hours, we know how to fix it. So the trade is changing drastically. And so the apprentices, they get that through 4 years, and then the journeymen coming back for journeyman upgrade training get that. That's just one system. Our millwrights, gas turbines, steam turbines, a lot of work in the oil industry, completely changing. That you have really got to stay on top of your game if you're going to stay employed. And a good millwright and a good carpenter can make $80,000 a year with great health care benefits and great pensions. So it behooves them, and they want to get the training. And that's what we provide on the 200 training centers throughout North America, and it's really driven right here in Las Vegas at our International Training Center.
Okay, all right. Thom, how do we enhance opportunities, access and affordability being key, for non-traditional students?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think one system I think we have in Nevada that enhances that aspect is that we are an open access state. So if you meet minimum qualifications, you get into our universities or state college. Everybody can get into our community colleges. And it's those systems that are committed to high quality and open access that I think are going to make dramatic changes to populating our workforce. Not necessarily those institutions just crack open their door just a little slightly and let a few people in. So I think part of that issue of access is one is beginning both with the traditional student much earlier in middle school. The mayor talked about the issue of the German model where they're identifying skill sets a lot earlier on. We wait too long, and that we should be having larger conversations about career pathways in the middle school to help inform the high schools and inform the community colleges. The other aspect I think that was striking what the mayor said dealt the issue is it's kind of scaling up some of these programs. So we have a lot of components in Nevada that should breed success. Under our former governor who's here, pushed a couple programs. He pushed a program of the dual credit program, both not only for academic but for workforce. Also under his leadership, we passed the Nevada Promise program, which is a last dollar program to go on to community college. After everything's exhausted, they will fill in the gap to move forward. But the challenge for many students, both traditional and non-traditional students, is how you scale up, and particularly for the non-traditional student, when life gets in the way, when you have jobs and you have child care issues and you have transportation issues. One thing that the mayor had mentioned is that in their city, transportation is covered. So we have a lot of pockets of really successful programs. And let me give you an example of one. At our high school, in Western High School, we have an HVAC program, HVAC program, that is tremendously successful. Students can enter their junior and senior year, and the time they graduate can actually get a certificate, which is one of our top high demand jobs in the state, making $60,000 a year. Here's the challenge that we face here is that if you live near Western, it works well. If you're talked to early on in middle school, not waiting until you're a junior or senior, it works well. But we don't have that access for the issue of transfer to make it equitable, that every student has this opportunity to go forward. One last thing I would mention is that we have embarked upon an initiative with Complete College America that all three of our higher education institutions in Southern Nevada are a part of. Community College, College of Southern Nevada, Nevada State, and UNLV, that addresses not only best practices around early advising and counseling and high-tech programs, but also addressing those barriers that we know keep many individuals from going on to higher education. What we know with non-traditional students, we know with others, is that they go part-time. Part-time students have more challenges in obtaining graduations and certificate completions. This identifies a lot of those real challenges, whether it's income security, whether it's mental health issues, whether it's transportation issues and childcare issues, and talks about how you coalesce industry and the private sector and philanthropy in order to meet some of those gaps. I think that is really key. I'm really proud of the initiative that our Southern institutions are involved in, and I think we're going to see some great results on that.
We have 15 to finish, and those other initiatives have made a big difference in terms of student retention and attainment. Okay, Elisa, you hinted at this a little bit already, but can we talk a little bit more about students in rural and urban areas and what kinds of different challenges there might be when it comes to education, and how what we might do to address that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll start off, there's lots of similarities, and like some of the similarities that come to mind are our kids growing up in low-income communities have so many unmet needs, and they're coming to schools that are not designed to meet all of those needs. And then they get to school, and often the school, there's so many barriers once they're in school, lack of rigorous content that they're exposed to, lack of high expectations or belief that all kids can perform at the same level. And we've learned over time that when we demand excellence from kids and we support them adequately, our kids will rise to the occasion, but we don't often see it that way. And we often see, especially in urban communities, there's lots of programs that exist. So we're programs rich and systems poor. There isn't a system that's sort of really wrapping their arms around our kids to ensure that kids are getting all of the supports that they need to thrive. And I think it was Speaker Boehner that said, education has a lane, but it's really a whole community that it's going to take to really, change the game for kids. In terms of the differences, I mean, the things that, are clear is there's just a lot less access in rural communities. So when you think about talent, just lack of access to talent, to attract talent because the economic opportunities in a rural community are often, limited. And so it's hard to get the great educators and, get people to come. And so when we talk about shortages, there's lots of shortages in math and science and special ed across the country, and then there's profound, shortages in certain states. But in our rural communities, my gosh, there is such a need. Someone earlier hinted or talked about the lack of broadband and infrastructure. And so, I mean, our kids are digital natives. I mean, they have access to everything. But there are too many kids, and about a quarter of our students in public schools go to rural schools. And I was just at talking with some folks at a rural convening, and when I asked what is their number one challenge, they said the lack of infrastructure to have access. And so everyone's talking about technology, but their kids just don't have access to Khan Academy, all these incredible resources that could just accelerate progress. And so there's a real fear that with technology and the rise of AI, we're just going to create more and more inequity. And so there's a mandate for us to really figure out how do we meet the needs of our kids in rural communities and not leave them further behind.
Okay. All right, Linda, one more for you. What lessons have you learned in implementing workforce development programs at Lone Star College? And what about them could we apply to universities and community colleges throughout the country?
It's interesting, the 1,100 community colleges work together pretty well. We are a consortium of colleges. Those of us that are workforce development leaders know each other and work with each other. There are about 3 frustrations to me at my age. I have a couple good years left to get some good work done. And one of them is Department of Labor. We've got to quit talking about, and I'm sorry, only registered apprenticeship. We've brought Department of Labor to Texas. If there are companies in the South that fear union with apprenticeship, then let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. Let's bring together the employers that are based in the South. Let's talk about how are we going to train people. So you're moving to South Carolina and Texas and Alabama and all this stuff, and you can't find the trained workforce, yet you don't want to sign up with Department of Labor apprenticeship. That's where all of the millions of dollars are going. Millions of dollars into grants and things for apprenticeship. We need to look at something differently and do something differently and do it fast. I've been to South Vietnam. I've seen the Gap manufacturing there. I've seen all the companies there. I've seen GE Oil and Gas there. I've been to India. I've seen our companies there. Automotive manufacturers, pharmaceutical manufacturers, they're all there. I've been to Brazil. Every oil and gas provider in the upstream oil and gas is in Macaé outside of Rio de Janeiro. They're all there. If we want them to stay here, we've got to do something, and we've got to quit horsing around and get something done. And if the focus is Department of Labor for workforce education, then let's have a real conversation with everybody in the room, and let's get those companies there that aren't at the table. I love and have huge respect for GE and General Motors and Boeing, but they aren't the only employers in this country. We have huge companies. Have any of you heard about National Oilwell Varco? Do you even know them? Before the downturn a few years ago, they had 60,000 employees globally. They were in over 100 countries. They had 80 locations in Houston. They bought every little machine shop in Houston. No one's talking to them. What do they need? And so we need to have those tough conversations, and we need to do it. And the other thing is money for students. You can't get out of poverty, everybody has said it, without some help. A lot of it's financial. If you are raising children and you're trying to hold down 3 part-time jobs so that you can go to a darn community college that one of our classes costs $300 bucks. $300 bucks. It's $1,500 for a semester at Lone Star College. Sounds like nothing to most of us, right? It does to them, especially when they have kids at home. So I'm going to give you one cute example. Metallica. Any of you heard of the band Metallica? Got it? I now have a Metallica t-shirt. Do you know why? I never listened to Metallica in my life. I listen to them now. Because Metallica put up $1 million to pay for the other stuff that isn't funded by FAFSA, to pay for the daycare, to pay for a shuttle to get people that don't even have a car, forget about gas, they don't have a car, to one of our beautiful training centers. We had a $485 million bond. We have state-of-the-art technology training centers. How are they going to get there? To pay for somebody that's transitioned that doesn't have money to help pay their rent. How are they going to pay their rent if they don't have the 3 jobs that they're doing? They can't come to school during the day. They've got to work. Or how do they go to school at night? That's the other hard conversation. We need to find other funding. The government can't pay for all of it. I wish they could. But we've got to get the people with money that want to do good work, that have these foundations, and pull these foundations together and let them help us with this work.
Well, that resonated, I think, with everybody in the audience. There's no doubt that more money for students and for programs make a huge difference. We have very few minutes left, and maybe for 60 seconds or so, we could talk about these challenges, opportunities, and how the private sector can help us enhance continuous education, lifelong learning. Anyone want to pop up here? Tom.
Well, we mentioned too the partnership we have with MGM, but in this state we've had other fantastic partnerships with Tesla, Panasonic, Nevada Health Centers, which runs our rural health centers here. I think those opportunities for increased dialogue, and that dialogue needs to go just beyond top level to involve the faculty and deans to have really deep conversations with industry about what is the skill set and how we need to change in order to deliver. The community colleges are much more nimble and they can respond more immediately to a lot of the current needs. But we also need to focus our universities and research universities on helping industry define what it is what type of worker and what type of skill set do we need in the future to help imagine. Many of these companies are brand new, and they're functioning on a day-to-day basis and have not imagined, too, you know, what's the workforce going to look like in 5, 10, and 15 years. And I think that's conversation, particularly for our research universities that need to expand.
Okay. Well, you want to add something quick?
I'd just
Go
like
ahead.
to pick up on what Linda said about the transportation and the other ancillaries that keep people from getting into an apprenticeship program. We've got a program in the United Brotherhood of Carpenters called My Brother's Keepers, mostly in minority communities, where we set our journeymen up that are minorities, and they sponsor young men in their neighborhood to come in, and that's been very successful, because the biggest problem we had is they've got no money for a car, and you know, if you're in a situation like one of our big metropolitan areas, they can't get to the job sites. So we're matching those young apprentices up with journeymen, and they're mentoring them, and it's been very successful.
Okay. Well, I think we've heard today how important we believe education is, the entire ecosystem of education in terms of workforce development. We haven't talked about teaching and learning specifically, another topic that might be really important, because changing the curriculum without working with the teachers is absolutely not effective, and there are lots of different ways that we could talk about that. We've talked about how education is not just about skills and knowledge, although those technical skills are incredibly important, but it's about the things that we know are soft skills that are key, whether it's critical thinking, whether it's team building, you know, whether it's communication, whether it's adaptability, or whether it's resilience. And these are the kinds of things that all of our educational institutions are working on to try and help our students, our employees, our future employees really prepare for tomorrow. So I want to thank all of you for an engaging conversation, and we can talk a little bit more backstage.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.